boozy, too sweet. But 3 or 4 of them was just like blew my mind. It was like, wow, I've got to make that. And 2 in particular, one was an Orange Blossom Riesling Pyment, which I wish I could remember who made it, but it was a professional meadery. I don't even know if they're still around. And I just loved it. It was like a wonderful balance of, sweet orange blossom honey and the acidity from the grapes. And another one that I really, really loved was a mesquite chipotle mead by a local guy. And it was just awesome. It started out with the nice, rich mesquite honey sweetness. And then the heat from the chipotle just built and built. And it came on and cleaned up that sweet honey, and you had the smoky aroma, and it was just wonderful. And that was actually the first mead I ever made. I hounded the guy, and I was like, hey, his name was Gary. He's like, Gary, how do you make that? And I was like, I bugged him, and until he gave me all the info I needed to make that mead. And the other one, the Riesling Pyment, was something I just experimented with on my own. I didn't have a lot of info to go on that one. I just repeatedly made it and looked up everything I could find, and that mead, my version of that mead was when in 2007 was my first Meadmaker of the year, at which I was completely shocked and surprised. I had never set out, to try to win that. I was just like, a bunch of us would all, compete and enter beers and meads, and so let's throw this one in there, and I was like, oh, I was floored. I was and amazed, and I still remember that feeling. And
yeah, that's pretty stunning. I mean, was that how many batches did you make before you entered that one, or was that your first one? If that was your first one and you got Meadmaker of the year, I'm gonna
No. So I started mead making in 2002, and so it was like 5 years of mead making before, but I was still making mostly beer, so mead was kind of a side thing. I don't know how many batches I'd have to. I could actually look that up, but I really don't know.
Okay, no, it's no worries. I was just kind of curious. So did you flip all the way over to mead, or were you still making beers along the way?
Oh, I was still making beers along the way. Yeah, I mean, until the last year or two, it was mostly beer, and maybe I don't know. 60-40 beer, but in the last 2 years I haven't really brewed much anymore. Beers anyway, mostly mead making in the last 3 years, because it's a lot less time consuming. A brew day for a beer is at least 5 hours, where I can whip up several meads in 2 hours.
4 of those 5 hours are cleaning.
Exactly. Yeah, if I knew how much cleaning was involved, before I got into the whole brewing thing, I was like, I probably never would have started.
Yeah, that is it. I've got to do a whole bunch of batches this winter, and it's like I keep looking at it and going, I'm tired of sanitizing and cleaning.
Just call it wild. It'll be fine. Yeah. I meant it to taste like that.
Yeah, honey is antimicrobial and antibacterial, right?
Isn't it? Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. It's an experiment. Let's see if it's going to work. But, so what, have you got a style preference, or?
Well, I like white Pyments. I like raspberries. So anything with raspberries is great. Tart cherries.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how your mead making evolved from what'd you start doing, and then how did it evolve as you?
Well, yeah. So there was a lot of mead making going on here, and before Ken Schramm's book came out, and so a lot of the things we were doing were not very well informed initially. So like fruit in the secondary. And then, Ken, and we knew Ken a little bit because he, some of the people here had known him from before. in the judging scene, and there was, I forget the contest. There was an old mead contest.
The Mazer Cup, the original Mazer Cup.
Yeah, the original Mazer Cup, exactly. And that they had been to, and so they knew Ken from that. And then Ken, Ken had come up here for the Fargo contest, Happy Halloween. And so a bunch of us were hanging out with Ken and talking to Ken, and his book comes out, and that completely flipped everything we were doing. It just changed the world, really. And, talking to Ken and tasting some of his meads, it's like, whoa, oh, yeah, this is great. Having had Heart of Darkness directly from Ken, that kind of changes your whole perspective on what mead can be. I mean, I started homebrewing in 1997, and at that time, you'd go to a club meeting and someone would have some mead, and they'd say, oh, yeah, it's about, 5 years old and it's finally drinkable.
I remember those.
Yeah, it's like, no. And nowadays you'd say, yeah, that's because you're doing it wrong. You didn't give it enough nutrient. You had old bread yeast or something, and the yeast got stressed, and yeah, you produced a lot of fusels. So after Ken Schramm, it was like all the fruit goes in the primary. You're using wine yeast. You're using more nutrients. You're trying to get the best ingredients, local, high-quality fruit in season rather than I've got this old fruit puree, I'm going to try that, or some frozen stuff that's been sitting around the freezer for a long time. So it evolved from that sort of experimental, we're just trying a bunch of stuff because there's a lot of good info out there, to really focusing on really good technique, high-quality ingredients, fresh fruit, all that fruit in the primary. And then, lately I've been trying to focus on things like, okay, what flavors do I like? And looking at, you guys have probably heard about the book, The Flavor Bible.
Yep. I've got one.
I mean, that's I got that book some years ago. A friend of mine said, oh, you got to have this book. It's like, so looking at, what do you like? You like raspberries. So what goes with raspberries? What's a good combination? What could enhance that or complement that? Because sometimes some meads can be really one note. So it's trying to make them pop. Give them more. Give them a wow factor. It's like there's more. So they don't. It's not just like a Kool-Aid mead. Trying to get something else in there, whether it's acidity, tannin, something to round out the flavor profile and make it give it more depth and complexity.
It sounds
more layers.
Yeah. I think complexity and like you say, Manny, layers. And I just putting together flavors that go well together, that are interesting together.
Right.
That's not something we really thought about back in the 90s. It was more,
not at
I
all.
have this honey, I have these strawberries, let's make mead, and it didn't occur to us to add cinnamon or coriander or turmeric
exactly.
Or something, or sage, or something interestingly different to really make it, like you say, pop. It was,
right. And that's the fun thing about mead is, you can be totally experimental and do that. And, sometimes it works sometimes it falls on its face, but,
and sometimes it does take 5 years to be
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes after 5 years, it's really amazing, but before that, not so much.
Yeah, and it's not always bad technique, but sometimes you just put too much sage in your sage course.
And bay leaves and 26
right.
other spices.
Yeah.
My first
Maybe
mead,
I need 27.
Yeah, my first mead was a recipe I found in this witch's book. And there wasn't any books then, Steve. Come on, it was the 90s. The only thing out there was Acton and Duncan, and he was like, so you dump your quart of acid blend in, and it was like, I wasn't feeling that. And this one had cinnamon, nutmeg, and orange peel, and lemon peel, and coriander, and just all these spices that I really like. you know? And I thought, ooh, that sounds amazing.
Uh-huh.
And there was like 15, 20 different spices. And I actually posted the recipe on the Cop Meat Facebook group. People were like, oh my God. And a couple tried making it, and it came out just as bad for them as it did for me, even with modern techniques. 'Cause this was when you boiled, you boiled your honey for 45 minutes and skimmed the top, and all of those. You remember those days? Yeah. And
actually, I never actually boiled any honey. I would
Really?
maybe heated some water.
Oh,
no,
wow.
never,
When I first got
never
started,
boiled a honey guy.
Yeah, when I first got started, that's all everybody was doing. That's all there was.
So a witch's book, you said?
Yeah, it's called A Witch's Brew, and it was a Llewellyn publishing book. In fact, the same publisher that published Mad About Mead, and which is I think how I ended up coming across it.
Okay.
And it it had a whole bunch of other recipes in there, but it had this mead recipe, and like I say, I went for it because spices. And followed directions, and I'm going to do a 1 gallon batch of it this winter with modern techniques and see if it works.
Maybe you need to wait for the full moon and dance around the fire naked,
probably
to get it to work out properly.
It didn't say anything about that, but that may have been inferred, and I just didn't realize it because I'm not a witch.
You weren't in the club,
right? Yeah. So, but it was a horrible in the bottle. Sent it to the Mazer Cup. They sent it back, going, "You could probably work on this some more."
No. Oh, no.
They were really nice about saying how awful it was,
Oh, wow.
They really were. I mean, they gave me lots of good advice, which was good. I learned, and that was my goal. I knew I wasn't going to win with it. Even as new as I was, I knew it wasn't that great. But I was so proud of it, I wanted to get it out there to see what other people thought. And then after I put it in the basement, I hung my head and took the 3 gallon fermenter, covered it in saran wrap, rubber banded the crap out of it, and threw it in the basement and tried to forget it was there because it was my baby and I couldn't throw it out. So, I
remember the first beer I ever made was absolutely terrible. It was a sorghum espresso stout.
Yeah, I heard rumors about that. Do tell.
It was medicinal. It was nasty, but we drank it.
Did it ever get drinkable, or did you just end up dumping it?
We drank it before that ever happened.
Because you have a moral imperative on your first one to drink it all.
Well, I didn't know any better at that point.
I totally hear you. Mine, after 3 years of sitting in the basement, I went down and there was maybe a gallon left at that point because I'd been sort of sipping, testing it every few months. And somewhere along the line, between year 2 and year 3, it went from really off and out of balance and really alcoholic and it turned into nectar of the gods. I don't know what happened exactly.
Really?
But yeah, I was stunned, and at that point I had so little left. I was like, damn it. So,
and you didn't immediately make more?
I know, right? Well, I was afraid to. I went on to make something a little easier, like, strawberry mead. Which is actually harder when you get right down to it, because strawberries are so damn particular. But, So, yeah, you said
strawberries are hard to work with, yeah.
They are. Have you done a lot of strawberry mills?
I've done a few, and they just don't, if you have enough strawberries in there initially, and they're really good fresh, but they don't last very long.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine, he juiced a bunch of strawberries, so he didn't get any of the seeds in there, and he just used, I don't think he used any water, just the juice of the strawberries and honey, and that was amazing mead. But you're going to have to juice a lot of strawberries. I'm not sure exactly what he did, but in terms of volume.
Okay, yeah, how do you get 5 gallons of strawberry juice? It's got to be like 50 pounds of strawberries.
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
There's a fruit winery that I visited when I was on my honeymoon, and the way they make their fruit wines is they juice the fruit and then just add sugar to bring it up to whatever alcohol percentage they want it to be. And I'd made my first strawberry wine before that, and I found it a little bit phenolic. And I was actually kind of surprised and comforted when theirs was phenolic too.
I've heard that.
So I didn't feel too bad about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I figure if it's happening to a commercial meadery, I'm not doing something wrong then.
Not necessarily. You've had some of the bad commercials, right?